It was one of those nights where everything seemed a little off. Even before the headlights hit the road, Jake had been working late at the office, the kind of long night shift that left him with that eerie, quiet feeling as he locked up and headed for the parking lot. The city lights, usually comforting, now felt distant, almost foreign, like they belonged to someone else's world. It was just past midnight when he finally stepped into his car, ready to head home. The roads, usually bustling with late-night drivers and the occasional trucker, were empty tonight, the type of night that made you feel like you were the only one left in the world. It felt strange. He wasn't the paranoid type, but there was something unsettling about the silence. Jake shrugged it off and turned the key in the ignition, the engine rumbling to life. As he pulled onto the freeway, he let out a long breath, trying to shake the fatigue that seemed to weigh him down. He didn't mind the drive, though. It was a long stretch, straight and empty, a kind of peaceful isolation he'd grown used to over the years. No street lights, no distractions, just him, the road, and the faint hum of the tires on the asphalt. Jake reached for the radio, flipping through stations, but nothing seemed to fill the silence. He settled on a podcast, something about unsolved mysteries, but even that couldn't quite capture his attention tonight. His eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, but there was nothing back there but the shadow of his own car. For the next few miles, it stayed that way, quiet, peaceful, but then, just as he was about to zone out, something caught his eye in the side mirror, a set of headlights. At first, he thought it was just another car on the road, but something felt off. The car wasn't passing him, like most cars did on these empty stretches. It was staying behind him, not tailgating, exactly, but definitely maintaining the same distance, always in his rear view. Jake frowned. It was probably nothing, just another driver on a long stretch of highway, headed in the same direction. The thought of being paranoid made him laugh a little to himself. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He sped up a little, just to test it. Maybe if he went faster, the other car would keep its distance or pass him by. But when Jake pushed the gas pedal, the car behind him did the same. Now it was clear. Whoever was back there wasn't just driving casually, they were following him. He wasn't one to get rattled easily, but a sinking feeling started to settle in the pit of his stomach. He checked his mirrors again. The headlights were still there, just far enough to make it hard to identify anything about the car or the driver, but there was no mistaking the fact that they were right there, tailing him like they were waiting for something. The road ahead was a straight shot for miles, but the unease in Jake's chest grew with every second. He tried to tell himself that he was being paranoid, that maybe it was a coincidence, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. After a few more minutes, Jake decided to make a move. He turned the wheel sharply, taking an exit onto a side road that he knew would take him out of the way and hopefully break the pattern. The headlights followed. Not a second after Jake made the turn, the car behind him did the same. His pulse quickened. "All right, this is getting ridiculous," Jake muttered to himself, trying to ignore the growing panic. He took another sharp turn, heading down a narrow, winding road that cut through the woods. The headlights still followed. Jake's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He wasn't an idiot. He knew when something wasn't right, but who would follow him this far out? And why? It didn't make sense. Suddenly, he realized the sound of his own engine was the only noise in the car. The podcast had stopped playing, the tires on the road, his breathing, that was it. There was nothing else. Then it happened. A flash of bright light from behind. The car behind him wasn't just following anymore, it was speeding up. In an instant, the vehicle was closing in on him, rapidly. Jake's heart skipped a beat as he slammed on the gas, his car lurching forward, trying to escape the vehicle that was now practically on his tail. The road was getting narrower, and there was nowhere to turn. The headlights blazed behind him, just inches from his rear bumper. He could feel the other car's presence like a physical weight. His mind raced, but all he could do was keep driving, his hands shaking as he steered the wheel, trying to find any way out. But the road was relentless. It stretched on, dark and empty, like a never-ending tunnel. At this point, Jake was no longer thinking about the reason why this was happening. He wasn't even thinking about what he would do if the car tried to pull up next to him. All he could focus on was getting away. He pushed the pedal to the floor, but the headlights behind him stayed steady. No matter how fast he went, the car was right there. Just as he was about to reach the end of the road, a thought crossed his mind. The car hadn't passed him. He hadn't seen it pull out to the side or overtake him at any point. It was still right behind him. But as he glanced in the side mirror one more time, a sickening realization hit him like a punch to the gut. There was no car anymore. There was nothing. This story seems to be getting scarier, doesn't it? If you want more stories like this, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. This helps create even more scary for you. Jake's heart was still racing, his chest tight with adrenaline. He slammed his foot on the brake and pulled over to the side of the road, his hands trembling on the wheel. He didn't know what to make of it. 1 second, the car was right behind him, close enough that he could almost feel its breath on his neck. The next, nothing, absolute silence. He looked in the rearview mirror again. The road was empty, no headlights, no shadow, just the endless stretch of pavement disappearing into the dark, as if the other car had never been there at all. Jake's breath came in shallow bursts as he leaned forward, staring at the mirror, waiting for something to happen, for the car to suddenly appear again. But there was nothing. The empty highway stretched out before him, its vast emptiness swallowing any trace of his pursuer. What the hell? Was he imagining things? Was he that exhausted? He had been working for hours. Maybe it was all just some weird trick of his tired mind. He tried to shake it off, but the feeling that something was wrong gnawed at him like a relentless ache. He stared out the windshield into the darkness, unsure of what to do. Was it even safe to keep driving? The road ahead looked deserted, too deserted, the kind of stretch that felt like it was designed for things to go wrong. But Jake needed to get home. His apartment was hours away, and he couldn't afford to sit here any longer, alone in the dead of night. He took a deep breath, turned the car back on, and slowly pulled back onto the road. The engine roared to life again, but this time it was quieter, almost too quiet. As the car hummed beneath him, he kept his eyes glued to the rearview mirror, expecting the headlights to appear again at any moment. Nothing. With each mile, the eerie emptiness seemed to stretch farther, the highway narrowing in the moonlight, as if he was being pulled deeper into some kind of void. He told himself it was all in his head. It had to be. Maybe he'd just been too focused on the road, imagining things. But deep down, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching him. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Jake was beginning to relax. Maybe he was just being paranoid. His mind had started to play tricks on him, fueled by exhaustion and the strange emptiness of the road. But the moment he let his guard down, a sudden flash of light from behind startled him, sending his heart racing again. The headlights, they were back. Jake's stomach dropped to his feet as he quickly glanced at the rearview mirror. The same car, the same headlights, back on his tail. It was too much to be a coincidence. His hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles white. This time, there was no mistake. Whoever was following him was keeping pace once again. No matter how fast or slow he went, the same eerie presence, lingering behind him, just out of sight. His breath quickened, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. It was like a predator stalking its prey. What the hell was going on? Why was this happening? Why didn't the car ever pass him? Jake glanced around, looking for a place to turn off, to take any kind of detour, anything to get away. But the road was still deserted, just the endless, open highway stretching ahead. No exits or signs of civilization in sight. His palms were sweating now. He checked the rearview again. The headlights had gotten closer, much closer this time. Too close. A moment ago, they had been a safe distance behind, but now they were right there, almost too close for comfort. Was it speeding up? He hit the accelerator, but the car behind him matched his pace. No matter how fast he went, that same vehicle stayed locked on his tail. Panic surged within him. His pulse thundered in his ears. His thoughts raced, but they couldn't keep up with the panic spreading through his chest. There was no phone signal out here, no way to call for help. The only thing Jake had was the road, and it was closing in on him. Suddenly, the headlights flickered. For a brief, terrifying moment, they blinked out entirely. Just for a second, Jake's breath caught in his throat. Then they came back on, but when they did, the car was much closer, so close that it was almost beside him. Jake's heart skipped. It was impossible. There was no way it could have closed that gap so quickly. He had been driving fast, too fast for any normal vehicle to keep up without overtaking him. That's when the first strange thought hit him. He didn't know how the car had gotten so close without passing him, without even trying to overtake him. It was almost as if it was waiting. He felt the temperature in the car drop, like the very air around him was growing colder. The hairs on his arms stood up. The pressure was building. He was about to snap. Then, without warning, the car pulled up next to him, coming into his peripheral vision. The windows were rolled down, but there was no one inside, no one driving it. Jake's stomach flipped as he quickly turned his gaze to the road ahead. His eyes couldn't focus. Everything around him blurred, and the sound of the tires on the road seemed to fade. His breath came in short gasps, and he tried to shake the dizziness, to focus, to drive. But as he looked into the side mirror one last time, his blood ran cold. The car had stopped. It wasn't moving anymore. It was just sitting there on the side of the road, its headlights still shining, casting an eerie glow on the deserted stretch of highway. Jake didn't stop to think. He floored the gas pedal, speeding away, as fast as he could, leaving the strange car behind. But the thought gnawed at him. Who was driving it? And why was it still there? Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he sped down the highway, his foot pressing harder on the gas pedal than ever before. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The car had stopped, just like that, without any explanation. The headlights had just stayed on, gleaming in the darkness as if mocking him. He kept glancing at his rearview mirror, half expecting to see those same headlights reappear, but the road behind him remained empty. No car, no headlights, just the vast, silent emptiness of the highway stretching out behind him. For the next few miles, Jake didn't slow down. He couldn't. His body was tense, every nerve on edge. He felt like he was being watched, like something was lurking just out of sight, waiting for him to let his guard down. It wasn't until he reached a small, abandoned gas station that he finally allowed himself to slow down. The eerie feeling that had been building in his chest since the car first appeared started to subside, just a little, as he rolled to a stop in front of the dimly lit pumps. He leaned back in his seat, trying to calm his breath. What had he just experienced? Could he have imagined the whole thing, his tired mind playing tricks on him, or was someone really following him? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on his window. Jake froze. His hand instinctively went to the door handle, but he stopped himself before he could open it. Instead, he stared at the dark silhouette standing outside his car. It was a man, maybe in his 40s, dressed in a worn-out jacket, and his face was shadowed by the brim of a baseball cap. The man didn't say a word, just stood there, his eyes fixed on Jake. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, the silence thick and suffocating. Jake's mind raced. Should he roll the window down? Should he ask if the man needed help? But something about the stranger's stillness made him hesitate. The man raised a hand, signaling Jake to roll down the window. Despite his instincts screaming at him to drive away, Jake did as he was told, reluctantly lowering the window just enough to hear the man speak. "I saw you," the man said in a low, raspy voice. His words weren't an accusation, more like a statement of fact. "I saw you back there." Jake's heart skipped a beat, his throat going dry. What do you mean?" The man didn't respond immediately. He simply leaned in closer to the window, his breath fogging up the glass. "You were being followed," the man continued, his eyes never leaving Jake's. "That's why I'm here." Jake didn't know what to say. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The man was right. He had been followed. The car, the headlights, the strange presence, it was all too real. The stranger stepped back from the window, glancing over his shoulder as if checking for something or someone watching. I don't know why they pick people like you, the man said, his voice low and almost conspiratorial. But it's not just you, it's always someone else, too. You're not the first. Jake's mind raced. This was insane. Who was this guy? What was he talking about? He needed answers. Who are you? Jake asked, his voice shaky. What's going on? The man stared at him for a moment, as if weighing the decision to answer. Then, he spoke again, his words slow and deliberate. I don't know their reasons. They're out there, on these roads, waiting. They never show themselves, but you'll feel them, watching, following. The man paused, his eyes scanning the darkness around them. You can't escape them, he muttered, almost to himself. But you can try. You have to keep moving, keep going, never stop. Don't give them a reason to think you're an easy target. Jake was trying to process everything the man had just said, but his thoughts were tangled, like wires crossing in his mind. Was this man telling the truth? Was he just some crazy person? Or was there something more to the warning? Before he could ask another question, the man stepped back, his face hardening. Don't trust anyone on the road at night, not anymore, he said, his voice suddenly colder, more urgent. And don't stop unless you want to be next. The man turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness just as suddenly as he had appeared. Jake's hand trembled as he reached for the door handle, but before he could get out, the engine started on its own. The car shook and rumbled to life, as if it were responding to something invisible. The door slammed shut with a loud bang, and Jake's eyes snapped to the rearview mirror. For a second, he saw nothing, just the empty highway stretching back the way he had come. Then, in the distance, the headlights of a car appeared, small at first, but quickly growing larger. Jake's blood ran cold. The car was coming back. It was the same car, the one that had been following him. But this time, there was no escaping it. The car was too close. Before Jake could even think to accelerate, the vehicle pulled up alongside him, so close that he could see the faint outline of the driver's face through the passenger window. But there was no one there. The seat was empty. The car was being driven by nothing. And that's when the panic truly set in. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as his eyes locked onto the empty seat of the car beside him. There was no driver. The car was being driven by nothing, by an invisible force. His breath came in sharp gasps, and a cold sweat broke out across his forehead. He wasn't sure if he was dreaming, hallucinating, or if he was caught in some kind of nightmare, but the sight in front of him was undeniable. The headlights of the car beside him flickered ominously. The vehicle had pulled up so close that Jake could feel the air shift, the hum of the engine vibrating through his own car. And yet, there was no one inside. The window was down just a crack, and the darkness inside the car seemed to swallow the empty space where the driver should have been. Without thinking, Jake slammed his foot on the gas pedal, the car surging forward with a jolt, as though it was trying to outrun its own terror. The engine roared, but it wasn't enough to escape the presence. The car next to him matched his speed, staying right alongside him as if taunting him, like a predator circling its prey. He couldn't see the road ahead clearly. His eyes were locked on the empty car, the ghostly vehicle trailing so close that it felt like it could swallow him whole at any second. The headlights seemed to pierce the darkness, blinding him, casting long shadows that stretched out of the corners of his vision. Jake's mind was spinning. He needed to get away. He had to, but no matter how fast he drove, no matter how many turns he made, the empty car stayed with him. The highway seemed endless now, an infinite stretch of dark asphalt that looped back on itself, refusing to let him escape. Every turn he took, every exit he tried to use, led him right back to the same place. The road never ended. It just kept going, stretching out into the night, a never-ending loop of terror. The car beside him was still there, always just to his right, its headlights burning bright, its empty seat glaring at him like an accusing ghost. Jake's hands were shaking on the wheel, his vision blurry as fear started to overtake him completely. Then, in a strange, horrifying moment of clarity, Jake realized something. The road he was on didn't lead anywhere. He'd driven for what felt like hours, but the landscape never changed. There were no exits, No signs of civilization, no other cars, just him and this empty road. The world had closed in on him, and he was trapped. The car beside him, this ghostly, phantom car, wasn't following him anymore. It had become a part of the road, a part of the night itself. It had no need to chase him anymore. He wasn't running anymore. He was just stuck. And that's when he heard it. The sound of the tires, his tires, suddenly distorting. The smooth, rhythmic hum of the road was replaced by a low, grinding noise, like metal scraping against metal. Jake's stomach dropped. He glanced at the dashboard. His fuel gauge was on empty. He hadn't noticed before, but now the warning light was flashing, bright and insistent. How had he not seen it? How long had he been driving on fumes? A new wave of panic hit him. He had no idea where he was anymore. No idea how much time had passed. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, his pulse echoing in his ears as he tried to focus. He couldn't stop. If he stopped, he might never start again. He couldn't let the car run out of gas. He couldn't let the road swallow him whole. But then, just as the sound of the tires grinding grew louder, the car next to him pulled ahead, slowly at first, then faster. It glided past him, the headlights blinding him once more, and as it passed, Jake's eyes caught a glimpse of something that froze him in place. For just a split second, the image of the driver flashed into his mind. But it wasn't a person, it wasn't even a shadow. It was something wrong, something unnatural. Jake's grip on the wheel tightened until his knuckles ached. He wanted to scream, to yell, but his voice wouldn't come. The image of the thing that had been driving the empty car flashed again, but it wasn't just a face anymore, it was something else entirely. A pale, twisted form that seemed to stretch, contort, and fade, like it was not meant to exist in this world. In that moment, Jake understood. This wasn't a normal car. This wasn't a normal road. It wasn't a normal night. The driver wasn't human. It wasn't following him. It was watching him, waiting for him to break. Jake's breathing was erratic, panic clouding his thoughts. His car was still moving, still racing down the highway, but it felt like it was no longer under his control. His hands were shaking so badly that he could barely hold onto the wheel, and the car was starting to swerve slightly, as though something invisible was tugging at it, forcing it off course. Then, the headlights of the other car flickered once more. For a moment, everything went black. Jake blinked, disoriented, his hands still gripping the wheel. He glanced out the window. The road was gone. There was no highway, no gas station, no empty car. Just nothing. The silence was deafening. But then, through the darkness, he saw something moving. It wasn't a car. It wasn't even a person. It was something else entirely, something that didn't belong to this world, something that had no right to be here. And it was getting closer. Jake's breath hitched in his throat as he slammed his foot on the brake, his car screeching to a halt. But the figure was already upon him, standing just outside his window, tall and gaunt, its eyes hollow, empty, like black voids that stretched on forever. He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came. The figure leaned in, closer and closer, until its face was inches from his own. "Welcome," it whispered, its voice low and crackling, like leaves being crushed underfoot. And then everything went dark. Do you want more scary stories? Your subscription and likes are a huge motivation for us to create new stories.